Good morning.
Committee will come to order. Will commissioners, staff, and guests please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Limited public comment. This time, any member of the public wishing to address the committee may do so for up to 3 minutes.
Berry County Drain Commissioner, Jim Dell. I brought you guys up. Brian Sensi just sent out another update on the Crooked Lake and what we're working on. There's a lot of people on Crooked Lake that don't have emails. And there's a lot of them that have MEI. Does that sound right? And theirs quite often bounce back. So I thought I'll distribute it to you guys. If anybody out, wherever the audience is, camera, if they want a copy of it, give us a jingle. We'll print them off, and that way they can have an update. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Is there further public comment today?
Good morning on this bright, sunshiny day. Sharon Zabrowski, Charlton Park Board Chair. I noticed on your agenda today that you are having some appeals for your budget. I see one of those is Parks and Recreation. I have sat in the chambers and listened to you talk about making this a wonderful vacation destination. And then I see here that when the Parks and Rec Board had asked for some money, no, we're not going to give you that. You can get part of it. People come to go to parks. Parks and Rec Board has worked very hard for many years to get a director, experienced, who can guide them in how to make our parks better, to increase working with other park boards, and possibly even to have more parks. We do have an area of Berry County that doesn't have any parks. So there's a lot of room for improvement. I see here you want to increase his hours for part-time. He's working half of part-time now. They started small to see what it was they needed. They did not want to waste taxpayers' money. If that was going to be enough hours, that would be fine. But as they've discovered, if they really want to move forward, he needs a lot more hours. Full-time would be even better. But at least move him up to full-time with the thought, to part-time, to the thought that he's going to increase his hours as we progress through the Parks and Rec system. I always thought when you looked at the Parks and Rec budget that you'd say, oh my gosh, that's not nearly enough. We need to give them more. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further public comment today? Hearing none, we'll move ahead. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to schedule a public hearing during the regular meeting of the Berry County Board of Commissioners on October 23rd, 2018 at 9:00 a.m. regarding the 2019 Berry County proposed budget, and to recommend approval of Resolution 1813 to adopt the 2019 Berry County Budget General Appropriations Act and millage after holding a public hearing.
So moved. Support.
Motion is made by Jackson, supported by Gibson. Discussion. Michael, do you want to walk us through the draft budget?
Sure. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
We have a fairly lengthy agenda this morning, so I will, while being thorough, I'll try to be brief as well. You should all have a copy of the 2019 proposed budget. Have had that for a little while now, and hopefully you've had a chance to review it. It is in the standard form that we have presented for a number of years now. It's in accordance with the Uniform Budget and Accounting Act, and follows with the process that we present to you for amendments as well. I'm going to start, though, right on page 1, and not to say I will be brief and then walk through the entire 30-some page document line by line. But on page 1 is the transmittal letter, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on that this year as opposed to the detail of just walking through each of the numbers. The general fund budget totals just a little over $17 million this year, and requires a tax levy of 5.3521 mils. That is the maximum allowed by Headley for 2019, and it is slightly down. We did have a reduction fraction this year, so but it is the maximum amount. And then for all budgeted funds, general, special revenue, debt, construction, enterprise, and internal service, the budget exceeds $48 million for 2019. Property taxes are the single largest portion, providing $11.8 million, or 69% of that $17.1 million for the general fund for 2019. The detail for the detail for taxes and the revenue portion of the budget can be found on pages 17 through 20. On the expenditure side of the budget, expenditures for 2019 are proposed at levels that fund current staffing, and in most cases requested operating levels. And I say in most cases because most departments, or many of them anyways, requested operating levels that are consistent with 2018, so we didn't reduce those. However, we didn't provide the additional requested unless there was a contract that was involved, i.e. a software maintenance contract or the like, that we have no choice but to increase it. The request for funds for 2019 were almost $1 million more than proposed revenues at the beginning of the process. This budget is balanced as presented to you. In doing that, the following methodology was used: requests for new positions, and then the reclassification of any existing positions, as in the past, were removed from the operating, or from the departmental budget. So that when you look through the departmental budget that is presented, is existing staffing levels, taking into account increases in benefit levels and or compensation that was negotiated or agreed upon for 2019, as well as then last year's operating levels, save for any additions to contracts or the like that are required. Existing positions were removed from the request and have been listed separately on pages 25 and 26. So we have provided, again, and consistent with the past, a list of those positions, a brief description, and then the estimated cost for those positions. You also can find them in more brevity on page 23, I believe it is. Yes, on the bottom of page 23 of the budget. And then appropriations to non-mandated agencies and departments have been budgeted at 2018 levels. Again, except in instances where a service contract or agreement exists. An example in that case would be Cooperative Extension. We have an annual operating agreement with Cooperative Extension that calls for a increase, and so that was budgeted in. But any new requests associated beyond what we have previously agreed to would have been pulled out. There are requests for 13 new positions and/or the reclassification of existing positions totaling a little over $500,000. Again, that can be found on pages 25 and 26. And again, due to revenue constraints, funding for these positions and/or reclassifications is not included in the budget. County has collective bargaining agreements with 5 unions. Agreements are in place through 2020 for all 5 unions. There is a 6th that we don't negotiate, and that's Central Dispatch, and I think they have agreements in place as well. Capital requests from departments total almost $823,000. You can find the itemized listing of capital requests both by department or agency, and then the fund that funding is proposed to come from on page 24. I'll walk through it real quickly. Information technology requested $114,000 from the data processing fund, $60,000 to replace county aerial photos. We do that on I don't know if it's a 5 or a 10-year cycle. I apologize, but we have a regular cycle for doing that. We participate with the state in the aerial photos. There's also $45,000 scheduled to replace approximately a quarter of the county's technology inventory. When I say technology, that's primarily the PC side of our technology inventory. And then $9,258 to purchase data that allows 1-foot elevation contours for the entire county. Something new, I believe. It's now available at a cost that's reasonable, if you may, and this will allow for not only the mapping department, but then Drain Commission or any other department that would use it to get that contour, have that contour data, as opposed to when we do a project having to pay project by project a engineer or consultant to get that. The Sheriff's Department has requested $100,000 from the vehicle fund to replace 2 marked patrol vehicles, continues their cycle of 2 vehicles 1 year, 3 vehicles the following, keeps our fleet of active patrol between 120 and 150,000 miles is the goal. The jail has requested a little over $175,000. They have requested funds year over year for a while now. This is the first year that we have requested it, and there's $15,000 being approved, or pardon me, approved it or recommended it. There's $15,000 being recommended to relocate and expand the property room. $31,000 recommended to replace and upgrade the parking lot lighting. This is really a safety hazard. We have lighting that doesn't work. We have poles that have come to their end of their life through rust and the elements. We have a little over almost $64,000 to replace laminate tile flooring within the jail that's brittle and starting to break and come up. Again, a safety hazard. And then $65,000 to install a partition in the multi-purpose room, which would allow that room to be used for programming as opposed to one big room, as well as allow access to the work release, I believe it is, wing, without interrupting or disrupting whatever activity might be going on in there. The trial court has requested $57,000, 24,000 from vehicle replacement to replace a front of the court vehicle, and then 33,000 to replace furniture in adult specialty courts. This is a newer area for us. We historically have not replaced furnishings. It's not been an area that we have, for lack of a better term, done a great job, or even maybe a good job over the years. Fortunately, we have purchased in many instances, or to our chagrin, I'm not sure, but furniture that was well-built and quality furniture that has lasted over the years. We're talking 20 and 30 years of use. The furniture in the adult specialty courts is not that case. It's furnishing that is worn, is coming apart, and we did create, if you'll recall, the capital replacement fund. The first priority for that are those items in the sheriff's department that are safety related but don't fall somewhere else. Mobile radios, vests, tasers. We appear to have funding in place and be structured with our fund balance for that and be managing those expenditures. So we're going to try to begin to address some of those areas that have furniture that's problematic. And then the Building and Grounds Department has requested $275,000, 100,000 for parking lot repair and replacement, maintenance, 25,000 to complete maintenance, tuck pointing to the bricks on this building, 80,000 to replace the doors, the main doors on this building that are aging and deteriorating, 20,000 to replace carpeting, and then 50,000 to remove and replace the barrier-free entrance to the front of the court building. These are all estimates. They, of course, will have to be competitively bid, and admittedly may be high estimates, but are the best estimate we have at this point. The animal shelter requested a total of $85,000 to come from the donation fund, $20,000 for air conditioning to the kennel area. We have, particularly this last summer, there were some periods where temperatures got cautiously concerning heat-wise, and are trying to address that so we don't have any problems. 15,000 to repaint interior walls and ceilings throughout the facility. 25,000, and again, these are all just estimates at this point, for heat and potential air conditioning in that training barn. 15,000 to construct a pavilion in the backyard of the animal shelter, and then up to 10,000 to put running water to the rear of the property. And then lastly, the Drain Commissioner has requested 16,000 from the capital replacement for a pump to enable sediment removal. Contingency, you can find that on page 20. This budget is balanced, so it maintains a general fund balance of $2.3 million. We've maintained that fund balance for a number of years now. It's approximately 14% of the general fund budgeted expenditures. That is what's available, if you may, in an emergency situation, or should we have a year where our expenditures exceed revenues. I commented that we continue to maintain that 2.3 year over year. As we do that and the budget goes up, the percentage that we have will go down. So at some point the board may want to look at increasing that fund balance so that it isn't 13, 12, 11, but maintains a range. 15% at one time was 12 to 15 was the recommended number. We got into 2008 and had the economic downturn that we did, saw the stress on budgets. Auditors are now starting to talk more of 15 to 20%. I think it's still up to the board where they want to maintain it. I'm comfortable with the 14% at this point, in that our budget does not seem to be stressed where we're having concern with revenues, or pardon me, expenditures exceeding revenues. As well, we have taken an opportunity to create funds to address unforeseen issues, buildings, vehicles, data processing, or technology capital. So effectively that increases that 2.3 million, or reduces the burden, if you may, that might need. So said a lot in that kind of that statement, but I'm not concerned at this point that 14% is a low number. I think we're just fine. Pension lot. Well, let me, for just a minute. On page 20 of the budget, there is an uncommitted general fund contingency of almost 117,000. That is funding that's uncommitted and available for the board to use at its discretion throughout the year. It's not a lot, but it's what we were able to, as we put the final budget together, where things came out. Pension liabilities. Berry County participates in a multi-employer defined benefit program, MERS, as you're familiar. In 2012, we closed our defined benefit programs, and all new hires as of then go into the hybrid. We have also been making additional contributions, as you're aware, to the pension plan to try to pay down our unfunded accrued liability. As our most recent evaluation as a whole, this includes Thornapple Manor in that mix. I think we were at 84% funded, and have moved up. We have continued to increase that that funded percentage year over year now as we make additional payments. Something that we might want to consider and take into account. It does not look like this year being 2018, the market is going to meet the assumed rate of return of 7 3/4%. My guess is we're going to be somewhere around the 5%, but I just don't know until it finishes out. But it does not, unless we have a run toward the end of the year, it doesn't look like we're going to meet that. So, which would have the effect of drawing against our funded percentage. We're taking a look at the 100% tax payment fund right now to see if there's any additional funds available above the cap. I think that there are, to the tune of a little over $1 million, almost $1.2 million. We might consider it as a separate item at some point before the end of the year, appropriating some of that or even all of that to try and offset this year's investment earnings. It will then have the impact of the following years when we do have better investment earnings. The money will be there. So something we might consider and think about as we try to keep a focus, if you may, on our pension liability. Post-employment benefits, OPEB, another item that's becoming more, for lack of a better term, well-known, popular. We have, as it goes, a fairly small OPEB liability. OPEB is our primarily our health insurance, retiree health insurance liability. We just had a valuation done. Our last valuation had us at 92%, I believe, funded. This most recent valuation, it's actually a draft at this point, but that we're reviewing, has us at 138% funded. So 1.56 million is in the fund and a liability of 1.13 million. And while that number may sound large, and it is, comparatively, there are liabilities for municipalities out there that are in the tens and even hundreds of millions.
And just to clarify for anybody listening in the audience or at home, this is not our traditional pension fund, correct?
That's correct. This is not the retirement pension. This is retirement health care.
Okay.
So, and I'd be happy to. I've talked about that we don't provide any benefits beyond age 65, and we've made numerous changes over the years to try to limit that to liability. And I'd be happy if anybody has questions to talk about it in more detail. On a positive, or I guess I don't want to assume that the others aren't, but on a more positive note, back in June of 2017, Standard & Poor's Global Ratings reviewed our credit rating. They do it every 2 years. They gave us a AA rating and commented that given historical budget performance and forward-looking planning, we do not expect to change the rating during the 2-year outlook horizon. The other rating agency that reviews us is Moody's, and Moody's just issued their review, what they call annual comment, in September of 2018, and they reaffirmed our AA2 rating. What the AA rating provides is that obligations are judged to be of high or very high credit quality and are subject to very low credit risk. There is only one category above us, and that is a AAA. We could actually, within the AA, we could move from a AA2 to a AA1, and then from there you move to a AAA. We will not, as much as I'd love to, we probably will not ever get to a AAA rating. That's reserved for your larger municipalities like Kent County, Grand Rapids, and the like. So very pleased with, and I've provided copies. You should all have received it in your email, but I also have provided copies for anybody that's interested in understanding more about our credit rating. It's a nice, concise and condensed evaluation. It gives us some idea of what the creditors look for, what are important. Of course, fund balances are, our pension liability plays a big role in it. Cash pool, or how much cash we have on hand, plays a big part of it. So a number of individuals within the county are involved in making this rating a reality. On the debt side, county has only one general funded primary government debt, and that's the front of the court building. The annual debt payment is included or budgeted in here. It's almost $89,000 for the year 2019, and the last scheduled debt payment will be in 2021. And then on fund balances, the county maintains in excess of 75 separate budgetary funds, each having its own fund balance. They can be found on pages 29 through 31. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions relative to any of them. We review those and try to ensure that they are maintained at reasonable levels. And then lastly, pages 12 through 14, if are possibly the most important pages in the budget, or in this budget, and that they are the budget resolution. While it's the numbers that we focus on, the budget resolution is actually what you will adopt. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at that budget resolution. We do a number of things in that budget resolution, including adopt this budget. It's a significant policy document, if you may. So with that, I'm going to stop. I would be happy to walk through the budget in more detail. Again, I know we have appeals, we have some other items, and then we have discussion about the jail and DOA project. So
Right.
a fairly heavy day today.
Yeah, but it's important that we get all of our questions answered. So thank you, Michael, for that presentation. I'm going to start down here with Dan. Do you have any questions or comments on the proposed budget?
No. The only thing that I would want to say is I appreciate you, Michael, and what you've done here. And it hasn't been just 1 year, it's been several years, and to help us put in this into shape, including those downtimes, and that was a tough thing that we did. We made some decisions that I think is helping this now. So, but I think that it's a situation where we need to stay in the conservative end of it, and to only get into things that are economically make sense to our county. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Connor?
As always, you do a great job. I
Thank you.
appreciate all the preparation that both you and Luella do. Thank you very much. I did see that the HR position was not funded again this year. And it was a full-time. I know that you were looking at probably a part-time also. I don't know, we can talk about that later, but I can see that it's not gonna, it's on the chopping block, so.
And maybe I'll reserve that till after appeals.
Okay.
And I think it's important that, kind of like a public hearing, that you get just an overview, hear the appeals,
Okay.
and be able to talk about those, and then I can talk a little bit about, for example, staffing, why I did or didn't recommend certain things. But we'll hold that until after.
Okay, thank you. Yes, great job. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
I echo those sentiments. We appreciate your work. I know this is no small task to put all this together, and especially what Dan said with our building projects staring us kind of in the near term here. It's important to maintain that conservative focus as we go forward and try to find creative solutions to make all that work for our constituents. And I think this budget represents some of that clear thinking for what we're trying to accomplish. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well,
Commissioner Gibson?
I have no questions. I think you're doing a good job.
I think you're doing an excellent job, although, you know, one of my pet peeves, the unfunded liabilities. You have a total right there of everything of the county on the,
you want to know what the unfunded liability is? I can also, if you want to do appeals, and when we get back, I'll,
that'd be fine.
So we should have it in a big like debt clock, you know.
And, yeah. And then, Thornapple Manor, you say has some, 911 I know has some, Transit has some, COA, Health Department, them are all broke out, right? Are they in our total?
They are. So that
So if they
80,
would pay theirs down, would bring our total down, right?
correct. That 84% includes everybody. And the Additional payments, however, are being put into a separate fund and do not affect or impact Thornapple Manor, 911, transit, those special revenue funds. So at some point, what we will do is they're setting in a separate division, being counted toward our overall payment, but the reason we set them into a separate division is that we don't want them to reduce our annual payment. If we put them into the divisions right now, it would be calculated in and just reduce our payment. So it wouldn't shorten the time with which we pay off that UAL, it would just reduce our annual payment. Our goal is to...
So we're paying on the principal?
Correct. Our goal is to make sure that we shorten the time frame, not the smooth out, if you may, the annual payment.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wing?
Just a quick
Luella's got a
correction.
question.
Yeah, just a quick correction. Our plan does not include the health department.
Oh, did you say how? Thank you, Luella. I didn't catch it. It does not include health department. Very good catch. Thank you. They're part of Eaton County.
So theirs is all added into Eaton County?
Correct. Yep. So Eaton County is the fiduciary. So they,
That's in their total budget then?
Yeah.
Okay.
either that or they are their separate division, one of the two through MERS. They could very well also be a separate, for lack of a better term, entity within MERS.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luella.
Commissioner Wing?
I'm just going to summarize what everybody else says. You're doing a bang-up job, Michael, and I don't think we could do it without you. Thanks for all your hard work.
You're welcome.
All right, I have no questions, but the question for the committee is to recommend the Board of Commissioners approval to schedule a public hearing during the regular meeting of the Berry County Board of Commissioners on October 23rd, 2018 at 9:00 a.m. regarding the 2019 Berry County proposed budget, and to recommend approval of Resolution 1813 to adopt the 2019 Berry County Budget, General Appropriations Act, and millage after holding a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize in the middle of a motion, but for a point of kind of technical order, you may want to table this motion, or may like to table or choose to table this motion until after you hear appeals.
Okay.
That will allow you then, based on the appeals, should you choose to grant something, you would then want to direct me to amend the budget, recommended budget, before you adopt that motion to send it on to the full board.
Okay.
For just as a point of order.
Is there any objection to tabling the question until later in the meeting?
You need a motion to table it?
No, if everyone's cool with
Okay.
it. All right, the motion is tabled. Now we move on to appeals. The first contestant here is Sheriff Leaf and Under Sheriff Houchley. Come on down.
Sheriff called.
How are you?
The sheriff called me on my way up the stairs and said he had to go to Grand Rapids, so
Okay,
Matt will be handling this by himself solo.
all right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to come and address each of you and to lay out some of the information that I've already provided to each of you. What we're requesting is the board consider granting a position, although we've heard very eloquently Michael explain how the budget process is proceeding. We are running into, part of my job, I believe, is to assess what we have available to use to make responsible fiduciary decisions about how we spend our budget that's allotted to us. That's my responsibility, and if I see something that needs addressing, I then approach the sheriff and give him the information, and he suggested that we proceed by coming up and addressing each of you to further explain where we are in our current position. It's a bit of a domino effect. Obviously, from the statistics that I provided, our calls for service are up considerably, 43% in about 5 years. And as a result, the court security positions that we now have are it's becoming an issue of coverage for us. We are expected by the courts in Berry County to provide a sworn deputy for court security. This is different than the screeners. These are the deputies that are actually responsible for transporting the inmates and being in the courtroom during every court hearing. And as you can see, I've laid out how many court hearings that could possibly be. We know the court hearings, thanks to Inez. We have some good statistics as far as how many court hearings are increasing. We have information from Central Dispatch showing how many calls for service are increasing. So we have the information in front of us. What we have is, on any normal day, we would have 3 deputies that would be available to work a shift in the morning. That's morning shift, or A shift we call it. We have 1 full-time court deputy that would automatically be assigned to circuit court every day that he's available to work and not on vacation or sick or whatever. So that part is covered. Out of those 3 deputies that we have available, 1 of those is going to be assigned to the court. So that makes that 2 deputies available for whatever comes in during the day, plus 1 road sergeant, I call him, or he's a scheduling sergeant in Sergeant Sixbury. If 1 deputy is off for any reason, vacation, comp, PLD, sick, FMLA, whatever, we're down to 1 less deputy and 1 sergeant. What we're seeing is, because we have to cover the court, we're required to cover the court, we're having to either use overtime to call someone in, or hopefully have enough coverage available that someone can fill in or help us. So I have tried to lay it out in a way that everyone would be able to understand, but it really gets down to the fact that there's been an increase in court services, and which automatically means, well, let me rephrase that. There's been an increase in calls for service, an increase in complaints, arrests, civil cases. So the court is having to have more and more hearings, which makes the need for the court deputies, the court security deputies, to be present. So we're running into a real situation where every morning we're trying to figure out how we're going to cover court. I don't want to say I hate to pay overtime, but I've obviously trying to be responsible with the budget. We're trying to avoid having to pay overtime to cover that issue. So we're looking at another way to make sure that the courts are covered and we have enough available help in the field when we need it. I do have a small correction. The cost that was estimated by when I wrote this was a little different than what Luella and Michael put together. Cost for a full-time deputy is going to be closer to $75,000 to $79,000 annually. So that is a little different than what I wrote in. So we're trying to balance the obligation to the court to the obligation we have to our community to respond to calls in a timely manner. I really am here because I believe it would be in the best interest of the county and of their citizens to have that availability, to have someone to respond to a call. We don't want to short the courts. We have to maintain that coverage. We have lots of calls that may not necessarily seem like it's a regular, if you want to call it, court activity, but there are a lot of things happening at the courts that require a deputy's service, juvenile transports, adult transports, various things that kind of happen on a daily basis. So we're down to having to try to work it out every day when we start the day and figure out who's going to be able to cover. And we're just asking that we consider at least one position for that court security to make sure that we are having adequate coverage. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to open it up to questions. We can start with Commissioner Connor.
Thank you. I have a couple questions on staffing issues. On your deputies that have the 4 12-hour days, that has got to impact your daily staffing because they're off more days. I mean, I know they're still working the same number of hours, actually a little more, but it's, by doing that, is that an impact?
It definitely is an impact. It definitely is. We really do end up technically with the same amount of coverage, but because of the contract and their accumulation of time, both vacation, comp time, if let's say one of them comes in and works overtime today, we've got somebody on overtime today, we had 2 call-offs. They can take that in comp time and use that comp time on another day, so we might have to cover that shift. But just using the time that they have built up in a natural process of natural accumulation of leave, we're estimating that we are short one deputy about 80% of the time just for natural reasons. That's a very high number, so you're exactly right. That may not necessarily be impacted by the 12-hour shift, though. 8-hour shifts are also going to accumulate the same amount of time. So, but that 12-hour shift allows for considerable amount of time, but not necessarily affecting their time off accumulation.
And then I had a part B that, sorry. And then I know that when individuals retire, they have to use up their leave, so you're not able to hire until that. Is that currently affecting you also?
Oh, most definitely. I can just use the last few examples. We have usually about 6 to 8 weeks available coverage, accumulated coverage, that has to be paid off, which means that they're on the books, but they're not there. So that is just the typical coverage. We've discussed that with Michael quite a bit and tried to figure out a way to handle it differently, but it just that's the way it's currently working out. We managed to cover, of course, but it definitely impacts us.
And so that impacts your court coverage?
Certainly does.
All right.
Mr. Jackson?
Thanks, Matt. Very well detailed and documented. And I guess the concerns are always, when I look at the historical numbers on it like that, in 2008, the Sheriff's Department was a little over 2.2 million. 2019 projected now is just under 3.2 million. Our population's gone up a little less than 2,000 people in that 10 years, but our calls continue to go through the roof. So we're bringing in an ornery 2,000 people apparently, huh? So
there's a lot of, I call it the unhappy hotel. It's not really a hotel, but it's at the same time, we do what we can. And quite honestly, our corrections staff does a wonderful job with what they have. So.
And I can see the numbers that things are busier. I know last year, kind of midstream, we added a position for, I forget what it was, but the corrections. And looking at this, I guess I'm not opposed to putting some help for the department. I guess I'm looking for a more creative solution though, versus putting on a full-time deputy and the cost of, $70-some thousand to the county. You said it had to be a sworn deputy, that's what's required?
That is what the court's expectation is at this time. That is not typical across the state.
Is it mandated?
It is, believe it is mandated in circuit court. But to kind of answer your question, as opposed to a full-time deputy, the reason I'm not here asking for a part-time or 2 part-time positions, which would obviously save money, is our contract, the deputy's contract has language in it that prevents that from happening. We did have a part-time court security position, and unfortunately, the union took a position that was taken away from the full-time position. So if we could somehow convince the union that there would be value in allowing a part-time person to come up and do that again, then we could manage to do something along the part-time line. However, we do have that written in the contract. So.
Okay. It just seems to make sense that if you had 1 or 2 people that were available on a part-time basis, that gives you more coverage, saves the county some money, gives you a little more flexibility. And those people, if they were interested in full-time positions as people retire or move on, then you've got somebody trained in that already. So maybe that's something we need to bring up with the union to discuss to see if we can add a little flexibility to it.
I would be happy to do that. I've made some references to it and tried, I guess my argument to the union would be it's actually helping the union members that are in the deputies union because they will have more coverage if they allow for a position like that to be created.
Mm-hmm. So just looking at our facilities program and what we're trying to do with the jail, obviously we're looking at resources and how we can best utilize those things and how we can be very cost conscious and conservative right now. So I'm really torn in that, but like I said, I'm open to creative solutions to help out. So, but thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Sometimes we interchange court officer and court security. Now, this position you're talking about has specific duties assigned by the court?
That's correct. Their main responsibility is to be present during any hearing, civil process, anything that's happening in the court. Anytime that either our magistrate or any of our 3 judges are on the bench, there is going to be a court deputy, a sworn deputy in that courtroom with them. And their main job, obviously, is the security of the court, but they do a lot of other functions, anywhere from in circuit court, we may have the deputy that's the court security deputy assigned to be the jury duty person that guards the door of the jurors as they deliberate, but they're always present in the courtroom. They're running juvenile transports. As you see, I have listed several of their responsibilities. Their job is to make sure that court is secure before, during, and after.
Can you define a little more what transport is? Are they actually leaving the courthouse?
That's exactly right. We have a mile. It's a dangerous mile, in my opinion, where they are. An example would be tomorrow is Wednesday. Thursday, we'll be transporting anywhere between 10 and 15 prisoners, inmates from the jail to one of the buildings, depending on where their court hearing is. So they're going in either to the circuit court or into district court, which means that we have 1 deputy, perhaps 2, depending on the size of the transport and the security needs, having to go with them. But we also have juvenile transports. We have writs, things where we have to bring inmates back from other facilities. Thankfully, we have a great correction staff that has some designated transport officers that help with that. So that really does help us tremendously, but there's a lot of other activities. We have a typical day in circuit court, motion day, for example, or sentencing day would be attorneys have to get in and see their clients in a private setting. Mm-hmm. So we have to be there for that during those, taking an inmate out of a lockup there at the jail or at the court and letting them sit in a hearing or a courtroom, private courtroom with one of the attorneys too. So there's lots of dynamics going on at the same time.
My final question is about obstacles to better utilizing time. You talked about some internal obstacles for using current staff. are there any other obstacles that would prevent, if we were to hire another court officer, would there be any prohibition of them helping downstairs in court
Absolutely not.
screening?
No, absolutely not. They can, they would be able to do whatever, where the need was. In other words, if we were aware we had a high-risk person that might be coming into the court, they would be available for that. And we actually already do that when we know those things might be happening, just as another set of eyes. They do actually have, full arrest powers. Our court screeners do a great job, but they have limited responses to certain situations. So one of the things that happens now is, let's say there's an alarm pushed. Then anybody who's available in the area of the county can come and respond to that alarm. But because of our court security, if they're in court, their responsibility is to that court. They actually can't respond unless the judge or hearing officer is off the bench. Then they might be able to react. So we'll have outside agencies or any other police officers respond to that alarm.
Right. Yeah, they're assigned the court. It's like the bailiff, when you see in the movies. Bailiff.
That's it. That is exactly it, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Gibson?
No questions.
Commissioner Smelker?
Under sworn officer, what falls under that? Does auxiliary posse, retired, any of them fall under sworn officers?
No, auxiliary posse are not sworn. Sworn officers are those certified by the Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. They are required to become certified, if you will, through a process that the state of Michigan controls. So in retired officers, if I knew there was a deputy that was going to retire soon, he is still sworn as long as he still works. He has a year to get another job. Or let's say an example of someone who's gone through a police academy, taken the MCOLS test, passed the test, they have 1 year to get a job with a law enforcement agency so that they can then become certified. There's certain requirements they have to go through. They have to go through a physical and a psychological examination. They have to show firearms proficiency. So there's a number of standards that they would have to attain to become a sworn, certified police officer in the state of Michigan. And those are standards maintained by the state of Michigan. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wing?
Can I make you explain anything else that we haven't heard? I think I've been through a lot of this discussion for years and years, and I really appreciate the work that you've done to explain it to us. I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Parker?
We talked about cross-training. Is there anything there that can help in that way?
When you mention cross-training, I'm assuming you have somebody specifically.
Well, yeah, you had somebody that had to do the lockout stuff, and you were trying to have different people learn how to do different things at the department.
Yeah.
Is there anything there that can help in this way at all?
There really isn't. We're sort of limited with what we have. We have approximately 28 sworn officers, deputies. Those are the ones, that's the pool we have that are qualified to come up and work in the court should they be needed. We cannot use corrections deputies unless they are also sworn and certified, which we actually do have one of those who maintains his certification through a part-time job in another agency. But, so corrections deputies cannot be included in that pool of available for court security, so.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Matt, just one more question. Yeah. We did approve money for that workroom and a second video arraignment room in this budget. Is that gonna take some of the workload off? Are we working with technology to lessen some of those transports? Is there a vision for that?
Absolutely a vision. The Polycoms, I think that you're referring to, make some difference. Mostly, there are basically, any of the courts can use the Polycoms, but we have two courts that use them the most frequently. One is our Magistrate Hillary, who will do arraignments, so they won't have to necessarily transport. Quite often, the circuit court judge will find a use for them. It really does help in when another agency who may hold an inmate that on our charges has a Polycom as well, because then we won't have to make that transport back. So yes, there is some work as to getting more technology this day and age, the better, to help save those. Think about it, save the risk as well of having to do transports. So.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, real quick.
On these figures that you gave us for complaints and bookings, it's pretty concerning figures. We are not alone in that, are we? I mean, other counties are, or is this something?
No, that's correct. Every county is seeing an increase. I don't know if, I would assume that it would be comparable to our 43% increase in calls for service and a 34% increase in, when I say complaints, those are the number of reports that the deputies have to actually make paper on. And of course, anytime you have an increase in those numbers, you're going to have those booking, the domino effect, the booking numbers go up. Therefore, the hearing, if there's people arrested, the hearing numbers are going to go up. So,
I thought so, but just wanted to make sure we weren't alone in some reason.
afraid not.
All right, well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
How are we doing, commissioners? You want a short break?
Yes, please.
All right, come back in 3 minutes.
It is short break.
I meant to say 5. 5.